Verity Lambourne escaped the ballroom the only way left to her, sideways, through a seam in the crowd that no one else had thought to covet, and out onto the balcony before the long glass door could betray her with the squeal of its hinge. She caught the handle, eased it shut against her palm, and let the latch settle with no more sound than a held breath. Inside, the music went on without her. Out here, the night took her whole. She had told herself she would breathe for the length of one country dance and go back before her cousin noticed. She had not told herself that the Duke of Marley's own balcony would smell of warm stone and honeysuckle, and that the relief of being unseen would buckle her knees. 1 second of it, she thought. 1 second before someone discovered her, and she would be steady again, and clever again, and safe in her corner where no one looked. The stone of the balustrade was sun-warm still, though the sun had been down 2 hours. July had baked the city all day, and the heat lay on the gardens now like a hand that would not lift. Below her, lanterns swung in the limes. Somewhere a fountain ticked over its own lip. She set both gloved hands flat on the warm stone, and counted the lit windows of the house across the square. 1, 2, 3, a dark one. 5. The way she had counted exits since she was a girl of 11, the night the men in the bad coats came to the house in Wiltshire, and her mother had stood very straight in the hall and pretended not to know what they were. 11. She had counted 11 of them then, too. She did not let herself finish the thought. Behind the glass, the ballroom blazed. 1,000 candles doubled in 1,000 mirrors. 400 people performing happiness at the top of their lungs, the air in there thick enough to chew. Beeswax and hot wax and orange flower water, and the particular sweetish reek of too many bodies in silk on the hottest night of the year. She had been 3 hours inside it. She had smiled at a great many people who did not know her name and did not wish to, and she had watched, from the wall, the one face she had come here dreading to see. Mr. Silas Crail, her uncle's friend, her uncle's choice. A handsome man. They were always handsome, the dangerous ones. She had learned that early too, with pale eyes that moved across a room the way a creditor's eyes move across a ledger, finding what is owed. He had found her twice tonight. The second time he had smiled and inclined his head and lifted 2 fingers in a small, private salute that meant soon. And her uncle, 3 feet from him, had beamed as though a bargain were already struck. It was. She knew it was. That was why she had run. "You may as well come away from the rail," she said aloud, very low, to no one, to the dark, to the version of herself that wanted to climb over it and walk to the river and keep walking. "You have nowhere to go, and no money to go there with. Count your windows and go back in." She counted. She got as far as the dark window, 4, when the glass door opened behind her with the precise small shriek she had been so careful to avoid, and a man's voice, pitched low and quick and entirely too pleased with itself, said, "Oh, thank God, a reasonable person. Tell me, and be honest, the survival of a peer of the realm depends on it. Is there a single soul out here besides yourself?" Verity did not turn at once. She had spent her life learning the great advantage of the one who is looked at last. She used it now, taking the measure of him in the black glass before she gave him her face. He was tall, and he filled the doorway the way some men fill a doorway, not by trying, but by being built on a scale the architect had not anticipated. Shoulders that strained the exquisite line of his coat, where the tailor had clearly begged him to stand still and be narrower. The candlelight came from behind him, so that he was all edge and no detail, a dark shape with a voice. But the voice she had, and the voice was doing a great deal of work to sound careless. 2, she said. A pause. 2 souls. 2 reasonable people. You included yourself in the count. I thought it polite to allow it. She heard him laugh, a short, surprised exhalation, as though she had reached out in the dark and tapped him on the sternum. He pulled the door to behind him, and the ballroom's roar dropped to a hum. And now they had the whole hot night to themselves, and the honeysuckle, and the ticking fountain. "You're hiding," he said. "I'm taking the air." "You're hiding. You did the thing with the door. The slow latch. Only people who do not wish to be followed close a door like a confession." He came a step nearer, out of the worst of the glare, and she had her first proper look at him. He was younger than she had braced for, 6 or 7 and 20, no more, with a face that had plainly been a gift to him from birth, and had been getting him out of difficulties ever since. A wide, mobile mouth, dark hair that would not lie down in this heat, and eyes that were laughing at the precise moment that the rest of him was not. He had the most expensive coat she had ever stood near. He wore it like a man wearing his brother's clothes. "And you closed the door fast," she said, "and stood with your back to it. People who do that are not hiding, they are escaping. There is a difference of degree." That landed somewhere. She watched it land, watched the laughing eyes go still for half a heartbeat, watched his thumb move once over the heavy ring on his smallest finger, turning it, before he caught himself and stopped. "There she is," he murmured. "The reasonable person. Madam, I could weep. Do you know what is on the other side of that door? A ball. A trap dressed as a ball. There are at present 9 unmarried young women in that room, each in possession of a mother, and the mothers have, I want to be fair to them, the patience and the strategic genius of Bonaparte's marshals, and they have agreed among themselves, by some treaty signed in a retiring room I was not invited to, that I am to be settled before the candles gutter. I have danced 4 dances. Each partner was selected for me. I was passed between them like a dish at a long dinner. I excused myself to find lemonade, and instead I found this door. And now I find you. And you are the first person I have spoken to all night who has not at some point glanced at the top of my head to see whether the coronet had grown back." She understood then, fully, who he was, and felt the floor of the evening tilt a 1/4 inch beneath her slippers. "You're Marley," she said. "I am the Duke of Marley," he agreed, "which is a different and sadder thing, but yes." He sketched a bow, all grace, mocking himself with it. "And you are not going to tell me your name?" "No." "You see, that is restful. Do you know you are the only restful thing in Grosvenor Square tonight?" He set his shoulder against the balustrade beside her, not too near, and looked out at his own swinging lanterns as though they belonged to someone he envied. "Go on then. Take your air. I shall stand here and be a wall, and you may pretend the wall is not a duke, and in a moment we shall both have to go back in and be terrible at our lives. But not yet." And against every law she had made for herself, Verity Lambourne stayed. She told herself it was strategy. The longer she stood out here, the longer she need not stand within reach of Silas Crail's 2 lifted fingers. The Duke was, in his way, the safest man in London to be caught beside, because no one on earth would believe a poor relation in a made-over gown had any business near him, and so no one would look at her twice. She would be invisible, standing next to the most visible man in the room, the way a small star vanishes beside the moon. That was the strategy. She held to it. It had nothing to do with the fact that he had asked her name and accepted no as though it were a gift, when every other man tonight had taken her silence as a thing to be talked over. "You're staring," he said, not turning his head. "I'm observing. There's a difference of degree." "By all means. What do you observe?" She should not have answered. She knew, even as she opened her mouth, that the sharp, true things were exactly the things she had taught herself to keep behind her teeth. That a woman with no fortune and no protector survives by being agreeable and forgettable, and that she was about to be neither. But the heat had loosened something, or the lanterns had, or it was simply that he had told her she was restful, and she had not been called anything kind in a long while. "I observe," she said, "that you have not once stood still since you came out here, which is the habit of a man who is sure that if he stops moving, someone will catch up with him. I observe that your coat was made for a man with broader shoulders than yours, which cannot be, because there is no broader man in that room, and so it was made for someone who is not here. I observe that you turn that ring when you wish you had said something cleverer, and that you have done it twice, and that both times you had in fact said something perfectly clever, which means the person you are trying to be clever enough for is not in the ballroom either. She drew breath. And I observe that you came out here to escape being married to a stranger, and that you are standing far too comfortably beside one, and that this should worry you more than it does. The night went very quiet. The fountain ticked. A burst of laughter rose from inside and fell away. The Duke of Marley had stopped moving. He was looking at her now, fully, the way she had been determined no man should look at her tonight. And the laughter had gone out of his eyes, and left behind it something so much more dangerous. Interest, plain and undefended. The look of a man who has been performing for 400 people, and has just been seen by one. "What is your name?" he said. It was not a question this time. It was nearly a plea. "It doesn't signify. It signifies enormously. You have just done in 90 seconds what my grandmother has failed to do in 3 seasons. You have made me feel found out. I should be furious. I am, instead." His thumb went toward the ring, and stopped, deliberately, a foot of will holding it still. "I am, instead, extremely curious. And curiosity is the one luxury a duke is never allowed, because it is always read as intention. So I will ask you a 3rd time, and you may refuse me a 3rd time, and I shall bear it. But I should like you to know I have never in my life wanted so badly to be refused less." She nearly told him. That was the terror of it. She, who had not given her true thought to anyone since she was a child, felt her name rise in her throat, like a confession at the rail. Verity. It meant truth. Her father had named her, in his good years, when there had still been money for irony. She did not say it. What stopped her was not wisdom. It was sound, a particular sound, threading up through the closed glass behind them, a woman's voice, raised over the music, in the carrying, unhurried tone of someone accustomed to being obeyed, and beneath it, the shuffle and hush of a crowd making way. "My grandson," the voice was saying, "has been gone from this room 20 minutes, and I am told there is a balcony. Fetch a light. No, I shall come myself." The Duke's whole body changed. The grace did not leave him, but it tightened, the way a sail tightens when the wind comes round. "That," he said softly, "is the Dowager Duchess of Marley, my grandmother, and she is bringing the entire field of marshals with her. And if she opens that door and finds me alone in the dark, she will have a betrothal arranged before I reach the foot of the stairs. And if she opens that door and finds me with you—" He stopped. Verity's heart was already moving fast, already counting. The dark window. 4. The rail too high to climb in this gown. The only other door at the far end past the orangery shutters. 11 steps at least. No time. "I'll go to the end," she breathed. "The shutters. She'll see only you. She'll see your skirts in the lantern light before you've gone 3 feet, and tomorrow there will be a paragraph in the Morning Post about the unknown woman on the Duke's balcony, and your name, which I do not even have, will be ruined for the want of it." He said it fast, flat, all the play gone, a man doing sums he hated. "No, listen. There is one thing that is not ruin, and it is the maddest thing I have ever proposed, and I am proposing it to a person whose name I do not know, and I have perhaps 4 seconds, so I am going to say it badly. Will you let me have been expecting you?" "What?" "When the door opens, will you let me have invited you out here? Will you be, for the length of 1 sentence, for 1 minute, for as long as it takes me to get us both off this balcony with our throats intact, will you be a person I am permitted to be standing beside? A connection of the family, a guest I sought out, anything but a stranger I cornered in the dark?" The handle inside was turning. She could hear it. The voice was almost upon the glass. Say yes, and I will spend the rest of my life owing you. Say no, and step behind the curtain, and I will face her alone, and you will be free of me forever. But say it now, because the door opened. It opened on a flood of candlelight and music, and the massed, jeweled, avid faces of half the ton. And at the front of them, leaning upon an ebony cane she plainly did not need, stood a small, upright woman in slate-grey silk, with a face like a closed book, and eyes that found her grandson in an instant, and then, slowly, deliberately, with the terrible leisure of the very powerful, slid sideways to the woman beside him. Verity felt every face arrive on her at once. She had spent her whole life arranging never to feel this. 400 pairs of eyes, the Morning Post in every one of them, her uncle somewhere in that crowd, and Silas Crail beside him. And the floor of the world dropped clean away, and there was nothing under her but the choice. And the choice had to be made between one breath and the next. The Duke's hand opened at his side, not reaching, offered. Palm up, fingers loose, an invitation she could refuse and no one would ever know she had been asked. 1 second, she had said to herself, an hour and a lifetime ago, leaning on the warm stone. 1 second of being unseen, and she would be steady again. She put her hand in his. His fingers closed over hers, warm and sure, and she felt the small, startled pressure of his thumb against her knuckles. Gratitude, astonishment, something. And he turned them both to face the open door together, and into the waiting silence, in a voice pitched to carry to the last marshal in the back rank. The Duke of Marley said, warmly, easily, as though it were the truest thing he had said all night. Grandmother, there you are. I had hopes to bring her to you properly before all this, but the heat drove us out, and I confess I have been keeping her to myself. He drew Verity's hand through the crook of his arm, anchoring her to his side, and she felt the whole strength of him decide in that instant to spend itself on the lie. Allow me to present the lady I have been so unforgivably secret about. And then he paused. 1 heartbeat, 2, and Verity understood, with a lurch that was almost laughter and almost terror, that he had run out of road. He did not have her name. He had built the whole bright bridge across the chasm and reached the far side, and discovered there was no plank for the last step, and 400 people were waiting, and the dowager's book-closed face had begun, very slightly, to open. Verity Lambourne had been invisible her entire life. She had counted exits and stood in corners and let the loud world pass her by. And the one law she had never broken was the law that said, do not be the woman they remember. She broke it now. She had, she reflected, with the strange cold clarity that came to her always at the worst moments, already broken everything else tonight. There was a tidiness in finishing the job. She lifted her chin and let her hand rest on the Duke's sleeve as though it had a right to be there, and stepped fractionally forward into the light so that they should all see her plainly, and into the silence. Before he could fail, before the lie could fall, before any of them could draw the breath that would damn them both, she said, in a clear, carrying, perfectly composed voice, the most reckless word of her life. Verity, she said. Miss Verity Lambourne. I'm afraid His Grace flatters himself. It was I who kept him. A ripple went through the crowd. Somewhere a fan snapped shut, and the Dowager Duchess of Marley looked at her, only at her now, as though the Duke had ceased to exist, for a long, weighing, marrow-deep moment, and then inclined her head a precise half-inch, and said, in a voice like a key turning in a lock, Miss Lambourne, how very interesting. You will sit with me at supper. It was not an invitation. Verity, whose whole survival had been built on hearing the difference, heard it. It was a sentence, and it had already been passed. and there was no court in England to appeal it to. The Duke's arm was warm and immovable under her hand. Beyond the Dowager's grey shoulder, in the press of staring faces, she found, because she always found him, because she had been finding him all night, the pale, moving eyes of Silas Crail, fixed on her now, with an expression that had nothing of soon in it any longer, and everything of a creditor who has just watched his collateral walk out the door on another man's arm. The door behind them was shut. The balcony was at her back. There was no slow latch left to ease, no corner left to stand in, no version of the evening in which she had merely taken the air and gone quietly home. "Smile," the Duke murmured, so low that only she could hear it, his lips barely moving, his face a portrait of ducal ease. "We have done something irreversible, Miss Verity Lambourne, and I have the strong sense we are only beginning to find out what." She smiled. It was the hardest thing she had done all night, and she did it perfectly. And she let him lead her in through the bright doorway, into the heat and the eyes and the music, and could not, for the life of her, have said whether the thing closing around them was a trap, or a rescue, or both wearing the same expensive coat. The supper room of Marley House had been laid for 200, and Verity was seated at the right hand of the Dowager Duchess, which meant that 200 people spent the first remove pretending not to look at her, and the second remove abandoning the pretense altogether. She had eaten in grand houses before, always below the sort, always as the cousin brought to make up a number, always with the particular care of a woman who has learned that a poor relation who drops a fork gives the table something to talk of for a week. She brought that same care to the gold-rimmed plate before her now. She did not reach for the wrong glass. She let the footman serve her the cold fowl and the buttered crayfish and the early peas, and she ate small, even portions, and she kept her spine off the chair back, and all the while the Dowager's grey silk rustled beside her like a creature deciding whether she was worth the trouble of swallowing. "You are not eating the crayfish," the old woman observed. "I find it very rich, Your Grace." "It is meant to be rich. My cook would be wounded to the soul to hear it called anything else." A pause, filled with the click of silver on porcelain up and down the long table, the high glitter of 400 candles laid double in the great pier glasses, the green smell of the cut limes someone had banked along the centre to fight the heat. Lambourne. There were Lambournes in Wiltshire, a pretty house near the Deverells, before it went. It was not a question, and Verity had survived a great many things by knowing which sentences required an answer and which were merely traps left open like cellar doors. She inclined her head and said nothing, and reached for her water glass with a hand she had ordered to be steady. "It went," the Dowager said, "I am told, very quietly, which is the only graceful way for a thing to go. Loud ruin is vulgar. Your father understood that, at least." Across the table and 4 places down, Verity could feel her uncle. She did not need to look. Mr. Horace Vane sat with his napkin tucked too high and his face a careful arrangement of avuncular delight, and beside him, leaning back with one arm hooked over his chair like a man at his own fireside, sat Silas Crail, and the two of them were watching her the way men watch a horse that has bolted, with their money still on its back. The Duke was at the head of the table, a country mile away, hemmed in by a bishop and a marchioness, and every 3rd minute his eyes came down the length of the linen and found her and held, 1 beat too long, before some marshal's daughter recalled them to their duty. "Your Grace knew my father?" Verity asked. "I knew of him. That is a different and safer thing." The Dowager set down her fork. She turned, and for the first time gave Verity the whole weight of her attention, and it was like standing in a doorway with the wind coming round. "I shall tell you what I know now, Miss Lambourne, and you will tell me whether it is true, because we have neither of us the time nor the digestion for fencing. My grandson has not voluntarily sought out the company of an unmarried woman in 3 years. He has been hunted uphill and down dale, and has slipped every snare laid for him, with a charm that makes the mothers forgive him before he has finished declining their daughters. And tonight he walks in from a dark balcony with a girl no one can place upon his arm, and announces he has been keeping her a secret. She let that sit. Now, either you are exactly what you appear, a poor connection he has known for years, and has had the wit to conceal until he could present you to me, or you are something else entirely. And the two of you have between you done a very dangerous thing very quickly. And you are about to discover that I am not a woman to be lied to twice at my own table. Verity's heart was going like a clock wound past its spring. The peas swam a little on her plate. 3 feet away, the old woman waited, and the candle heat pressed on the back of her neck, and somewhere behind her a footman's tray chimed, and she understood that the next sentence she spoke would decide a very great deal. "Your Grace," she said, "asks me to choose between 2 stories, and I notice you have arranged them so that the truthful one ruins me, and the false one only makes me a liar. That is very elegant. I think I shall decline both." The dowager's eyes did not change, but something far back in them shifted, the way a cat's tail shifts before it has decided anything. "Go on." "I will tell you what is true, and you may build whatever story upon it you find least vulgar. It is true that I met your grandson tonight, on the balcony, an hour ago, and not before. It is true that he was hiding from his marshals, and I was hiding from mine, and that we recognized each other the way 2 people recognize each other in a burning house." She kept her voice low, beneath the supper roar, pitched for one listener only. "And it is true that when the door opened, he did me a great kindness, for which he will be very sorry. And I did him a worse one. And now we are both standing in the wreck of it, being civil over crayfish. That is everything. I have no fortune, no protector worth the name, and an uncle 4 chairs down who would tell you a prettier tale and charge you for it. I would rather you despise me for the truth than pay him for the lie." For a long moment, the Dowager of Marley said nothing at all. The candles guttered in a draught from the opened terrace doors. The smell of the night garden, honeysuckle again, and warm box hedge, and the iron tang of the great fountain, came in over the smell of the food. Then the old woman picked up her fork, speared a single buttered crayfish, ate it with evident satisfaction, and said to the table at large, in a voice that carried, "Miss Lambourne and I are getting on famously. You may all stop staring. It is bad for the complexion." And then, beneath it, to Verity alone, in a tone gone suddenly soft and terrible, "You will come to me tomorrow, child. At 11. We are not finished. You and I have only just begun. But you have bought yourself 1 night by telling me the truth, which is more than my grandson managed. And I find I am curious to see what you do with it." It was the second sentence passed on her in an hour, and like the first, there was no appeal. And Verity bowed her head over her plate, and felt the trap she had walked into close 1 more notch, and could not for her life decide whether the woman beside her was her judge, or, impossibly, her first ally in years. The dancing did not resume after supper. The heat had won. The great rooms emptied themselves slowly toward the cooler terraces and the card rooms, and in the milling of it, Verity contrived, at last, to be ordinary, to be a woman walking from one room to another, unremarkable, almost unseen. It lasted the length of the long gallery. At the door to the orangery, a hand closed on her elbow, light and dry, and entirely without warmth, and her uncle's voice said, very pleasantly, very close to her ear, "A word, my dear. The night air. You are fond of it, I hear." He steered her through the orangery doors into the green-smelling dark, among the lemon trees in their great lead tubs and the wet earth coolness of the place. And there, waiting between 2 of the trees with the patience of a man who has all the time in the world, because he has bought it, stood Silas Crail. "Niece," said Horace Vane. He let go her elbow, now there were walls about them. You have had an interesting evening. Uncle. Sit. There was an iron bench. She did not sit. No, stand then, since we are being modern. Verity. He used the name like a man testing a coin with his teeth. Do you know, when your aunt and I took you in, fed you, clothed you, made over my own girl's gowns for your back, I said to her, that one will repay us. That one has a head on her. I did not say what I meant by repay. I am saying it now. I know what you meant by it. I rather think you do not, or you would not have spent the evening hanging upon a duke. His pleasantness did not waver. That was the worst of him, she had always thought. The way the threat never raised its voice, the way it smiled. Mr. Crail and I had an understanding, a generous one, more generous than a girl with nothing has any right to. And tonight, you have made me look a fool in front of 400 people, and Mr. Crail a jilt. And I will tell you plainly, niece, that I am the only roof you have, and roofs can be taken away. It was Crail who moved then. He came out from between the lemon trees into the thin light from the gallery windows, and his handsome face was as smooth as ever, and his pale eyes went over her with that ledger look, finding what was owed. I bear no grudge, he said, and his voice was soft, almost kind, which was how she knew to be most afraid. A girl may be turned by a coronet. It is in the nature of girls. I have known you to be a sensible creature, Miss Lambourne, and sensible creatures do not mistake a duke's good manners for a duke's intentions. He smiled. He will be amusing himself. You understand that. A man of that rank, a girl of your situation. There is one word for what he wants, and it is not wife. And when he is tired of the novelty of you, he will set you down exactly where he found you, only soiled. And your uncle's roof will not be there, and I, generous as I am, may no longer be inclined to offer mine. I am offering it tonight. I should not count upon the offer surviving the week. Verity stood very straight among the lemon trees, the way her mother had stood very straight in the hall in Wiltshire, and pretended not to know what they were. The earth smell rose around her, and the gallery music came faint and silvered through the glass, and she felt the old, cold clarity descend, the calm that came to her always at the worst moments. And she found that she was, to her own great surprise, not afraid at all. Or not only afraid. Mr. Crail, she said, you have described very precisely what a man of rank wants from a girl of my situation. I notice you described it without once pausing to wonder whether it is also what you want, and whether the only difference between you and the Duke is that he troubled to ask my name first. She watched the smooth face tighten the smallest fraction at the corner of the eye. I am not turned by a coronet. I am a great many disagreeable things, Mr. Crail, but I have never once been a fool, and you would do better to remember it than to threaten me with roofs. Good night, Uncle. I shall be at Marley House at 11 tomorrow. The Dowager has commanded it. You may explain to Mr. Crail what it costs a man to come between that lady and her commands. She walked out of the orangery on legs that wished very much to shake and did not permit it. And behind her, she heard her uncle begin to speak, and Silas Crail say, low, let her go. For now. And that, for now, followed her down the gallery like a cold draught at the ankles. She did not get 3 doors before the Duke found her. He came out of a side passage, with his cravat already loosened by 1 defiant inch, and the look of a man who has been escaping his own party for the 2nd time in one night, and has gotten rather good at it. He took her by the wrist, not the elbow. She noted the difference, the way her uncle had taken her to steer, and the Duke took her to stop, and drew her into the embrasure of a tall window, half behind the curtain, where the cooler dark of the square pressed against the glass, and the candle glare did not reach. There you are, he said. I have been trying to reach you across that table for 2 hours, and I would have had better luck swimming the channel. Are you alive? You look as though you have seen a creditor. I have, as it happens. 2 of them. That stopped the lightness in him. Tell me. It is not your concern. It became my concern, he said, at approximately 9:30 this evening, when a remarkable woman put her hand in mine and saved my throat in front of half of London. And I do not consider the debt discharged by a single supper, however excellent the crayfish. He had not let go her wrist. The night air came through the loose old sash, smelling of dust and limes and the river somewhere beyond. And below in the square, a watchman called the hour, and the late carriages ground over the cobbles. Who frightened you? No one frightened me. It was very nearly true. She held to it. My uncle wishes me to marry a man called Silas Crale, who has money and a great deal of patience and the manners of a creditor. And tonight I have inconvenienced them both very badly by being seen upon your arm. And now they are angry. And you, your grace, have made my situation a great deal worse by trying to make it better, which I find is a habit with you. She drew breath. Crale says you are amusing yourself, that a man of your rank, with a girl of mine, wants one thing, and that the word for it is not wife. I told him he was a fool. I should like to know whether I lied. The Duke went very still in the half-dark, the way he had gone still on the balcony when she had read him aloud. The curtains stirred between them. Somewhere down the gallery a door opened and shut, and a woman laughed. That, he said slowly, is the second time tonight you have asked me a question that no one is supposed to ask a duke. And the second time I have found I would rather answer you than breathe. He turned and set his shoulder to the window frame and looked at her with the laughter gone right out of him. I do not know what I want, Miss Lambourne. That is the honest, the unforgivable answer. I know that I went out onto that balcony to be no one for 10 minutes, and I found the one person in 3 seasons who let me. I know that when my grandmother opened that door, I would have said anything to keep you from being ruined, and that the anything I said has very possibly ruined you worse, and that I have lain awake, figuratively, the night is young, over very little in my life, and I expect to lie awake over this. I know that I do not want what Crale says I want. A muscle moved in his jaw, but I will not insult you by pretending I have a tidy thing to offer you instead, because I do not, and you would see through it before I finish the sentence. You see through everything. It is the most alarming quality I have ever encountered in a human being, and I cannot stop seeking it out. That is not an answer. No, he agreed. It is the truth, which I am finding in your company is a different and far more dangerous thing. A breath. His thumb moved over the heavy ring, once, and this time he let it, openly, watching her watch him do it. Will you come to me tomorrow before you go to her? 10:30. There is something I must tell you, and I would rather you heard it from me than from my grandmother, who will tell it to wound, because she tells everything to wound. It is how she shows affection. What thing? A thing about why a coat was made for broader shoulders than mine, he said quietly, and she felt the floor of the evening tilt again, that 1/4-inch drop. And why I turn this ring, and who the person is that I am never clever enough for. You guessed there was someone not in the ballroom. You were right. There is someone not in any ballroom, and has not been for 2 years. And it is the reason I came home a duke when I had spent my whole life being most carefully not one. And it changes. It would change. A great deal of what you think you read in me tonight. Will you come? And Verity, who had refused her name 3 times to this man, and given it at last in front of 400 people, who had refused the iron bench and the roof and the patient creditor in the lemon trees, found that she had already, in the secret place where she made her decisions before she knew she was making them, said yes. 10:30, she said. 10:30. He released her wrist at last, slowly, as though it cost him something, and she felt the cool air rush in where his hand had been. Now go and find your cousin, and your dreadful uncle, and let them take you home. And do not, whatever you do, let Crail see that he frightened you, because men of that kind feed on it, and you are far too valuable to be eaten." "I am not frightened." "I know," said the Duke of Marley, and for the first time the smile came back, but changed, smaller, truer, costing more. "That is precisely the trouble. Good night, Miss Verity Lambourne. I find I am very glad I do not know how this ends." She left him in the window embrasure with the curtain stirring at his shoulder, and she walked the long way to the entrance hall, past the card rooms and the wilting flowers, and the footman snuffing the first of the candles. And she did not look back, because she knew that if she looked back, she would see him watching her, and she had had enough, for one night, of being seen. The carriage home was her uncle's, which meant it was a small, dark box that smelled of old leather and his snuff, and she shared it with him and with her cousin Augusta, who had drunk too much ratafia and slept against the window with her mouth open, and with a silence that had teeth. Her uncle did not speak until they had turned out of the square, and the great lit windows of Marley House had slid away behind them. 11 o'clock, he said then, into the dark. At the Dowager's command. You said it as though it were armor, niece. She heard him settle back against the squabs, heard the small, wet sound of him taking a pinch. Let me tell you what I heard, sitting 4 chairs down while you charmed an old woman over crayfish. I heard a girl with nothing make herself very interesting to people who can afford to be interested for an evening, and then forget. The Dowager will use you to bring her grandson to heel. When he is leashed, she will drop you in the street, and she will do it kindly, which is worse. The Duke will use you to vex his grandmother. When she yields, he will have no further need of the lever. And you, my clever niece, will have spent the only thing you own, your good name, to be a tool in a quarrel between 2 people who were quarreling long before you crawled out onto that balcony, and will go on quarreling long after they have set you down. A pause. The carriage swayed. Crail will still have you. He told me so, in the orangery, after you had flounced off. He is a patient man, and a forgiving one, and he sees your value even now, even soiled by gossip, which is more than the great folk will. You have until the talk dies. Be sensible before it does. Verity looked out at the dark streets going by, the link boys' torches smearing past, the shuttered shops, the one lit upper window where someone else was awake at this hour, with their own troubles. She counted them. 1, 2, a dark one, 4. She did not answer her uncle, because there was nothing in what he said that was a lie, and that was the terror of it. He had described the trap exactly, every wall of it, and the only thing he had got wrong was the smallest thing, and the largest, which was that she had not, this time, walked into it with her eyes shut. She had walked in, seeing. That changed nothing about the trap. It changed everything about her. It was past 2 when she reached her narrow bed under the eaves in the house in Henrietta Street, and she lay in the heat with the window open to a city that would not cool, and she thought about a coat cut for broader shoulders, and a ring turned over and over for a person who was in no ballroom, and a dowager's voice like a key in a lock, and a creditor's pale eyes that no longer said soon. She thought she would not sleep, and she was right. And in the morning, when she came down at 9 to beg the loan of the good bonnet for her 2 appointments, her aunt met her at the foot of the stairs with a face the colour of whey and a folded paper in her hand, and said, "It has come already. Read it." The whole town would have read it by noon, and held out, between 2 trembling fingers, that morning's Morning Post, folded to the column where, beneath a heading that made Verity's stomach drop clean through the floor, some hand that knew far too much had set down in cold print not only the unknown woman on the Duke's balcony, but her name, and her uncle's, and the broken understanding with Mr. Silas Crail of Cheapside, every private wall of last night's trap thrown open to 400,000 strangers. And at the very end, like a knife laid quietly on the table, a single line she read 3 times before she understood it could only have come from one person in the world. The paper was still damp from the press, and the ink came off grey on her bare fingertips, and the headings swam up at her in the thick black type the post kept for matters of consequence. A ducal surprise in Grosvenor Square. The hall of the house in Henrietta Street smelled of last night's tallow and this morning's weak coffee, and through the open street door came the rattle of a milk cart and the cry of a man selling watercress. And Verity stood at the foot of the stairs in her shift and wrapper, and read her own ruin, set in cold metal, for the price of a penny. It was all there. The unknown woman on the Duke of Marny's balcony. The slow latch, almost. Some hand had known about the latch. Her name, Miss V. L. Asterisk. The dashes fooling no one. Her uncle, named outright, Mr. H. Vane. And the broken understanding with Mr. S. Crail of Cheapside, a gentleman of business, the of business set in an italic that did the sneering so the writer need not. She read it standing, because she could not have sat. Her aunt hovered at her elbow, making a small, wet sound of distress, and somewhere above, Augusta was being sick into a basin, and the watercress man cried his greens, and Verity read down the column to the end, where the knife lay. His Grace, we are reliably informed, professed himself upon the occasion very glad that he did not know how the matter would end. The town shares his curiosity, and undertakes to keep him company in it. She read it 3 times. The first time it was only spite. The second time, the cold came into her hands. The third time she understood, with the slow horror of a person feeling the floor give one board at a time, that those were his words, his exact words, given to her in a window embrasure, with the curtain at his shoulder, and the dark square pressing the glass, and no living soul within 20 feet. I am very glad I do not know how this ends. He had said it softly, and smiled the small, true smile, and let her go. And now it was in the Morning Post, in quotation marks, for 4pence the quire. Verity. Her aunt's hand fluttered to her sleeve. Verity, you have gone the colour of the cloth. Sit down, child, before you— I am quite well, aunt. Her own voice came out flat and even and very far away. The voice from the worst moments, the one that arrived when everything else left. She folded the paper along its crease, exactly, corner to corner, the way one folds a thing one means never to open again. Where is my uncle? Gone out. Gone to his coffee house at 7, before it came. He does not know yet. He will know by the time he has finished his pot. She heard the milk cart move off down the street, the iron tires jolting in the ruts, and the morning heat was already standing in the hall like a third person, thick and close, July refusing to break. I have an appointment in Grosvenor Square at 10:30, and another at 11, and I find I am no longer in want of the good bonnet. I shall go as I am, plain. They have had everything else of mine this morning. They may have me plain. You cannot mean to go there. After— Her aunt's whisper cracked. They will turn you from the door. Then I shall have wasted a walk. She set the folded paper down on the hall table, very gently, as one lays a thing to rest, and the small composed click of it on the wood was the loudest sound she had made. But I do not think they will. I think the Duke of Marley and I have a great deal to say to one another, and I find I should like to say mine to his face, before the town finishes telling me how it ends. She went up to dress with the print of the ink still grey on her fingers, and she did not wash it off, because it seemed to her, climbing the narrow stair into the heat under the eaves, that she had better remember exactly what his given word was worth. The walk from Henrietta Street to Grosvenor Square was 3/4 of a mile, and she did it in the full glare of the morning, hatless, under a parasol borrowed without asking, past the porters sweating at the corners, and the kennel reeking of yesterday's heat, and the bricklayers calling down from a half-built front, and she counted nothing. That was how she knew the fury was real. She always counted. Windows, exits, men in bad coats. And this morning, the numbers had simply stopped, and there was only the dry burn behind her eyes and the cool, flat thing in her chest that had decided, somewhere about Brook Street, that she would not be made a fool of twice by the same handsome mouth. Marley House by daylight was a great pale cliff of Portland stone. The lions over the door streaked black with the city's breath, and the footman who opened to her had been schooled, plainly, to a particular look for particular callers. And he was preparing to deploy it when she said, before he could, "Miss Lambourne, His Grace is expecting me at 10:30. I am early. I shall wait where he can find me quickly." It was not true that he expected her this early, but it was true enough in its bones, and footmen are trained to the bones of a thing. He led her into a hall floored in cold black and white marble that struck up through her thin soles like the floor of a church, and the heat fell away all at once, and the place smelled of beeswax and lilies going over in a great urn, and the particular emptiness of a house too large for the people in it. She had not waited the length of a paternoster before quick boots came on the stair, 2 at a time, and the Duke of Marley came down into the marble hall with his coat off and his shirt sleeves rolled and the Morning Post crushed in one fist, and his face, his charming, mobile, gift from birth face, was white to the lips with a rage she had not yet earned the reading of. "You came," he said. "Thank God. I sent a man to Henrietta Street not 10 minutes since, and you must have crossed him. Verity." He stopped on the bottom step. Something in how she stood had reached him. "What is it? What has happened that is worse than this?" He shook the paper. "Because your face says there is a worse thing, and I cannot at present imagine one." "Can you not?" She let the borrowed parasol close with a snap that went round the marble like a shot. "Then I shall help you. Read me the last line, Your Grace, aloud, the one in the quotation marks." A flicker. He glanced at the crushed paper as though it had bitten him. "The very glad I do not know how it ends. What of it?" And then she watched it arrive in him, the same slow, board-by-board horror that had taken her in the hall at home, watched the colour that was left drain out of his face entirely. "That is, those were words you said to me, in the window, with the curtain drawn and no one by." Her voice did not rise. It was the not rising that frightened people. She had learned that at 11, in the hall in Wiltshire, watching her mother not raise hers. "I have spent the morning, Your Grace, trying to think of one person in the world who could have set that sentence in the Morning Post. And I can think of exactly one. And he is standing on the bottom step of his own stair in his shirt sleeves, looking very surprised, and being, I will grant you, extremely good at it." The silence rang. Up in the whirl of the great stair, a clock ticked, fat and slow. The lilies dropped a petal, brown at the edge, onto the marble with a sound she should not have been able to hear, and heard. "You think I gave it to them?" he said. "I think a man who wishes to escape his marshals could find no neater way than to be irrevocably and publicly attached, overnight, to a girl so far beneath him that no one could suspect her of contriving it. A girl who would be blamed for the whole, and discarded when the heat of it died, and never once believed if she said the Duke had arranged his own capture. My uncle laid it out for me in the carriage last night, every wall of it. I told myself he was wrong about you." She heard the burn come into her voice at last, and despised it. "I am so very tired of being wrong about people, in exactly the way that costs me the most." He came down the last step. He did not reach for her, he had learned. She would give him that. The difference between the elbow and the wrist. But he stopped near enough that she could see the morning's beard he had not had time to have shaved away, and the open collar where the cravat should have been, and that his hands, when he spread them, were not quite steady. "Miss Lambourne, Verity, look at me and tell me whether I am lying, because you are the one human creature alive who can, and I am about to stake everything on it." He drew a breath that shook, I did not give that line to anyone. I have not slept. I have written 4 notes to my grandmother and burned 3. I came down those stairs just now to beg your pardon for a thing I thought was merely catastrophic, and you have shown me it is something else, something I do not yet understand, and that I find I am very much more afraid of. Because if those were my words—" His voice dropped and went cold and exact in a way she had not heard from him. "Then someone heard them. Someone stood close enough in my own house, in a curtained window, to take down a sentence I breathed at you, and no one else, and sold it before the chandeliers were cold. That is not a gossip with sharp ears at supper, Verity. That is a person who was placed, watching me, watching us." The cold, flat thing in her chest shifted, and underneath it, for the first time that morning, something colder still uncurled. She made herself hold his eyes, the laughing eyes, not laughing now, steady on hers and undefended. And she did the thing she did, the thing that had kept her alive. She read him. The set of the jaw, the shake in the hands he had not bothered to hide, the fury that was turned inward and outward both, but not, she saw, not at her, and not the bright performed thing he wore for ballrooms. This was the man under the coat, and the man under the coat was telling the truth. "No," she said slowly. "You did not do it." "No." Which is worse. She felt the floor give another board. "Because it means you are right. Someone was there." Someone was there. He turned from her, 3 quick steps across the marble and back. The old habit. The man who could not stop moving when the net came down. He stopped with his hand on the newel post, gripping it, the heavy signet on his smallest finger catching the cold north light from the fanlight. And whoever it was knew what they had. Not a woman on the balcony that any footman might sell for a shilling. They had the private thing. They are not trading in scandal, Verity. They are trading in us. And I do not know who, and I do not know what they want, and I have dragged you into the middle of it with a lie I told to save you from a smaller harm." He laughed, short and without any joy in it at all. "I have a gift, my grandmother says, for making things worse with my whole heart. She is generally right." A door opened somewhere off the hall, and a servant's feet crossed and receded, and they both went still until it had gone. And Verity understood the change that this single morning had worked, that they were now 2 people who fell silent at the sound of footsteps, in his own house, on his own marble, because they no longer knew which feet were paid by whom. "You said," she began, and had to begin again, because her mouth had gone dry. "Last night, in the window, you said there was a thing you must tell me before I went to your grandmother. A thing about the coat and the ring, and the person who is in no ballroom." She gestured at the great empty hall. The cliff of stone built to hold a family there was now too little of. "I think you had better tell me now, Your Grace, because I have just staked my good name on the word of a man I met 14 hours ago, and I should like to know, before your grandmother finishes me at 11, who exactly I have made myself a fool for." He looked at her a long moment. Then he let go the newel post, and crossed the hall, and opened a door into a room she had not known was there. It was a small room, and an unfashionable one, a library that was used, not displayed, with the curtains half drawn against the heat and the smell of old leather and dust and lamp oil thick in the dimness, and the great desk under the window, heaped with papers in 2 hands, one neat, and one a hasty scrawl. He did not sit. He went to the chimney-piece, where a portrait hung that was not of him, and stood beneath it with his back to her. And she came as far as the corner of the desk, and waited, because some confessions must be let to find their own pace. "His name was Lawrence," the Duke said. "My brother. He was 4 years the elder, and he was the Duke of Marley. And he was, I want to be precise, because the town deals only in the imprecise. He was the better man. Not the kinder. I am kinder, I think, when I trouble. But the better. He was built for it, do you see, the way the coat was built for him. He touched, without seeming to know he did it, the shoulder of his own shirt, where the seam strained. This was his. I have not had my own made. The tailor begs me to stand straighter, and I cannot tell him that the man it was cut for stood a half-inch taller and a hand broader, and never once, in all his life, came out onto a balcony to hide, because he was never afraid of a single room he ever walked into. I borrow his coat to walk into the rooms that were his. It is the most cowardly thing about me, and there is a great deal of competition. "What happened to him?" she said, very low. "A fever. 2 winters passed. It went through the house at the seat in 3 weeks, and it took the undergardener and a housemaid and a horse. And then it took my brother, who had nursed the lot of them because he would not be told to keep to his own wing." His voice was perfectly level, and that was how she knew the cost of it. I was in Lisbon. I came home a duke. I had spent 29 years being most carefully Lord Julian, the spare, the amusing one, the one who need never be anything in particular. And I came up the drive in the rain, and the knocker was off the door, and the servants were in black, and I've been wearing his coat, and turning his ring, and being charming at 400 people a night ever since. Because if I stop... His hand went to the signet, and turned it, and this time he turned it deliberately, openly, watching it move. If I stop moving, someone catches up with me. You said that on the balcony. You said it to a stranger in the dark, and it was the truest thing anyone has said to me in 2 years, and I have not had a steady night's sleep since, for wondering how you knew. Julian. So that was the name under the title. She found she had it now, and that she would keep it, and that it changed the shape of the room. "The ring," she said. "You turn it for him." "I turn it because it is his, and it sits on my hand, and every soul who bows to it is bowing to a man who is in the vault at Marley, and not to me. And I am never, I will never be, clever enough, or broad enough, or good enough to be the thing they are bowing to. That is the person in no ballroom, Miss Lambourne. That is who I am not equal to. You guessed at a living rival, some woman who would not have me. It would have been so much easier to bear." He turned from the portrait at last and faced her, and his eyes were dry and terrible. "So now you know what manner of man you have ruined yourself beside, a counterfeit in a borrowed coat. The town is quite right to be curious how it ends. I am curious myself. I have been counterfeiting an ending for 2 years, and I have not the smallest idea what a real one would look like." Verity stood in the dim, used library, with the dust turning gold in the one bar of light that came through the gap in the curtains, and she looked at the portrait of the better brother. A pleasant, ordinary face, broad-shouldered, made to be obeyed, and not greatly missed by the painter. And then at the living one, who was none of those things, and had been straining to be all of them. And something in her, that had been clenched since the hall in Wiltshire 18 years ago, loosened 1 notch, and she was furious at it for loosening. "You are not a counterfeit," she said. "You are a frightened man wearing his brother's coat, which is a different thing, and a far more forgivable one. And if you say counterfeit to me again, I shall be very short with you, because I've spent my whole life being told what I am by people who wanted me smaller, and I find I cannot stand to watch a man do it to himself in his own library." She heard the words come out of her and could not stop them. The morning had broken something in her that had held a long time. "But none of it, Your Grace, tells me who stood in your window last night and sold us, and that is the only question that signifies. Because at 11 o'clock your grandmother is going to ask me how I mean to mend a thing I cannot mend, and I have nothing to give her but the truth, and the truth this morning has grown a second face I cannot read." A clock somewhere in the house began to strike, slow and sweet, and they both counted it without meaning to. She saw his lips move, and it struck 11. 11 on the morning of the day she was summoned. and below the last stroke came the sound that had stopped them once already. Feet in the hall, more than one pair, and a cane, and a footman's murmur, and the high, unhurried voice she had last heard say, "You will sit with me at supper," saying now to someone, "In the small library. He always hides in the small library. He thinks I do not know." And the Cheapside person, yes, show him up. If the town will make a farce of my house, I had as well have the whole cast on the stage. The Duke's eyes met hers across the dusty bar of light. "The Cheapside person," he said softly. "She means Crail," said Verity, and the cold uncurled all the way, and she put her hand flat on the corner of the great desk to steady herself, and did not let it shake. "She has sent for Crail." The door opened on the Dowager Duchess of Marley, upright in dove-grey morning silk, with the ebony cane she did not lean on, and her book-closed face took in the room at a glance. The grandson in his shirt-sleeves, the girl by the desk, the portrait, the half-drawn curtains, the whole confessional dimness of it. And she came in and seated herself in the one good chair, as though the chair had been waiting all morning for precisely this, and folded both hands on the head of the cane. "Well," she said, "you have both read it. Good. I dislike explaining the obvious before noon." Her eyes went to Verity, and there was something in them this morning that had not been at supper. Sharper. And underneath the sharpness, unwillingly, a thread of something that might, in a warmer woman, have been respect. "Sit down, child. You look as though you have walked here, which I conclude you have, because no one sent a carriage. Because we are all of us this morning behaving like persons in a bad play. Julian, put your coat on. You are a duke, not a stable hand, whatever the post implies." "Grandmother, coat, on." She watched him cross to the chair where it lay and shrug into it, the brother's coat, the shoulders straining. And something passed over the old face so quickly that Verity almost missed it. A flinch, there and gone. At the sight of the coat, she must surely know. She tells everything to wound, because it is how she shows affection. Verity filed it, the flinch, the way she filed everything, against a later need. Now. The Dowager turned the full weight of herself on Verity. "Here is the situation, stated plainly, because you and I dealt in plain things last night, and I find I have not the patience this morning for any other coin. My grandson's name, and yours, are joined in print from here to Edinburgh by tomorrow's mails. There are precisely 2 roads out of that. The first is that we deny it, that we name you an impertinent nobody who forced herself upon a balcony, that I cut you publicly and to the bone, that you are sent back to your uncle ruined past mending, and the town is given a villain to despise, so that my grandson may be pitied. That road is open. It is paved. It costs me nothing, and you everything. And I will tell you frankly that until I walked into this room, it was the road I had chosen." The bar of light crept on the floor. Somewhere below, a door, and feet on the stair. The second pair, the patient pair, coming up. "And the second road?" Verity asked. "The second road," said the Dowager, "is that the thing in the post is made true. That my grandson is betrothed to you in fact and in form, the banns called, the settlement drawn, before the week is out. That we give the town not a scandal, but a love match, the Duke of Marley's romantic secret, kept and now confessed, and we drown the sneer in sentiment, which the English will always swallow if you serve it warm enough." She let that sit. "It is the better road. It saves your name, and his, and mine. It has only the one disadvantage, which is that it is a cage. And I am the kind of woman who tells you a thing is a cage before she shuts you in it. Because I was shut in one myself at your age, and no one had the decency to name it. So, I am naming it." Her hands tightened on the cane. "Which will you have, Miss Lambourne? The ruin that frees you, or the rescue that binds you? Choose quickly." I hear the other half of your evening coming up my stairs. And Verity, with the cold clarity full upon her now, with the Duke standing rigid in his brother's coat and his eyes on her and not on his grandmother, with the patient feet 2 doors away on the landing, understood that this was the choice the whole night had been narrowing toward, and that there was no third road, and that whichever she took, she lost something she would not get back. And she opened her mouth to answer, and got as far as the indrawn breath. The library door opened a second time, without a knock, and Silas Crale walked in. He had dressed for it. That was the first thing she saw, that he had risen this morning and read the post, and chosen his coat with care. A sober, expensive blue, the dress of a man who means to be taken seriously by his betters, and is confident he will be. His handsome face was smooth and composed, and faintly, dreadfully sorrowful. The face of a friend come on a sad errand, and his pale eyes went round the room, the dowager, the Duke, the girl by the desk, and made their ledger, and found, she saw, that the sum pleased him. Your Grace. He bowed to the dowager, exactly low enough. You are gracious to receive me. I came the moment I read I will not call it news, the moment I read the trouble. He straightened. I am a plain man of business, and I will not pretend to your manners, so I will say plainly what I have come to say, and then I will go, and trouble none of you further than I must. His eyes came to rest on Verity, and the sorrow in them did not reach the cold beneath. Miss Lambourne and I had an understanding. Her uncle will confirm it. It is witnessed. There is paper. A gentleman does not lightly release a lady from a promise, even when she has forgotten herself in a warm night upon a balcony. I am here, before this noble lady and before his Grace, to say that I hold to my promise, that I forgive what is past, and that I expect Miss Lambourne to honour what was given. There was no promise, Verity said. There was a sale, conducted between you and my uncle, of a thing that was never theirs to sell. There is paper, said Crale gently, and from the breast of the sober blue coat he drew it, a folded document, sealed, and he did not hand it to anyone, only held it where they could all see the seal, and laid it, with great care, in the exact centre of the dowager's reading table, on the cleared green leather, within her reach, and within Verity's. Your uncle's hand, Miss Lambourne, and your uncle's bond besides, for he is in my debt rather deeper than he has told you. Deep enough that the roof in Henrietta Street is mine in all but the name on the lease, and the name will follow at my pleasure. He smiled, the soft, kind smile, the most frightening thing in the room. I mention it only so that we are all of us dealing, as her Grace says she prefers, in plain coin. The dowager did not touch the paper. Verity watched her not touch it, watched the old eyes go to the seal and read it without a flicker. The Duke had gone very white again above his brother's collar. And the last line, Verity heard herself say. The cold had her wholly now. Her voice came out level as still water. In the post, Mr. Crale. The line in the quotation marks. The private thing. You read the post this morning, you said. Tell me, did it surprise you? For the first time, something moved in the smooth face. Not guilt. He was past guilt, she thought, the way a creditor is past mercy. Something colder and more pleased. The look of a man who finds his work admired sooner than he hoped. I read a great many things, Miss Lambourne, he said softly, and I forget very little. And I have ears in more houses than you would think a Cheapside man could afford. A girl of your situation cannot whisper to a duke in a curtained window and suppose the curtain deaf. You are clever. I have always said you were clever. But you are clever in small rooms, and you have walked into a very large one. He inclined his head to the dowager, to the Duke, picked up his hat from where he had set it, and stepped back toward the door he had come in by, leaving the sealed paper lying in the centre of the green leather, like a knife laid quietly on a cloth. I will leave you to your noble choice, but I should tell Miss Lambourne, as a friend, as a man who forgives, that there is a great deal more in my keeping than one line of newsprint. Whispers about a house in Wiltshire, about a lady who once stood very straight in a hall and pretended not to know what the men in the bad coats were. The town has not had that story yet. His hand was on the door. His pale eyes found hers and held, and there was no soon in them, and no creditor's patience either, only the flat certainty of a man who has at last got his collateral cornered in a room with one door. It would be a pity if it had to. Good morning, Your Grace. Miss Lambourne, I shall expect to hear from you within the week. The door clicked shut behind him. The sealed paper lay in the bar of dusty light. The Dowager looked at it, and at Verity, and said nothing at all. And the Duke took one step toward Verity, and stopped, because there was nothing he could reach across. And Verity stood with her ink-grey fingers flat on the corner of the great desk, and understood that the man had not only known her name and her shame, he had known her mother's. The one thing on earth she had told no living soul. The thing that had no paper, and only one set of witnesses. The 11 men in the bad coats themselves, and could only have come up out of the buried past, through the master who had sent them. Which meant Crail had not bought it last night, in a curtained window, with his ears in a great house. He had had it all along. For the length of 3 slow breaths, no one in the small library moved. The bar of dusty light had crept as far as the sealed paper, and it lay glowing faintly along one folded edge, and out in the hall, the lilies dropped another brown petal that Verity heard fall on the marble like a small, dry word. She was doing the sum. She did it the way she had done sums her whole life, cold, fast, from the corner of the room. A secret with no paper, a secret with no witness. A thing she had carried out of a Wiltshire hall as a child, and set down in no one's keeping, not her aunt's, not Augusta's, not the curate's, not once in all the agreeable, forgettable years. And a Cheapside man had just laid it on the green leather as easily as a tradesman lays down a bill of long standing. He could not have bought it last night, she said. The Dowager's head came round. Speak plainly, child. I told you I have no digestion for riddles before noon. The line in the post, the window, that he could buy. A footman with sharp ears, a curtain, but was not death. Verity's own voice reached her from a long way off, level as still water. But the other thing, my mother. A hall in Wiltshire, men in bad coats, and a lady standing very straight and pretending not to know what they were. I have told that to no person living. There is no paper of it. There is no soul who could sell it to him, because there is no soul I ever sold it to. She lifted her eyes from the sealed document and found Julian's, dark and very still above his brother's collar. Which means he did not learn it. He remembers it. He was there. The clock in the stairwell ticked, fat and slow, into the dust and the lamp oil smell. Go after him, the Dowager said. Julian was already at the door. He did not ring. He wrenched it open, and his voice went down the marble like a thrown thing. Crail! Crail! You will come back into this room. And there was nothing ducal in it at all, only the flat command of a man who has stopped pretending to be careless. And Verity heard, below, the patient, unhurried feet pause on the stair, and turn, and come back up. Silas Crail filled the doorway in his sober, expensive blue, hat in hand, the sorrowful friend, and his pale eyes made their ledger of the room a second time, and found that the change in it interested him. Your Grace recalls me. I am at the family's service. Shut the door, Verity said. He did, with a soft click, smiling. She crossed to the reading table. She made her slippers carry her steady over the worn carpet, past the heaped desk, into the bar of light, and she picked up the sealed paper, and she broke the seal with her ink-grey thumb. The wax cracked sharp as a knuckle. She unfolded it. The hand inside was a clerk's copperplate, and her uncle's signature crawled at the foot, and her eyes went down it and found, in the third line, the words she had known would be there before she read them. In consideration of sums advanced, these 15 years and upward, she read aloud, against the estate at Lambourne in the county of Wilts. She lowered it. 15 years and upward, Mr. Crail. You held my father's paper before I was old enough to count the men you sent to enforce it. You took the house. You took the orchard and the long meadow and the pretty rooms near the Deverells. And you have spent all the years since waiting to the only thing the house had left in it worth the having, to grow up. Her hand did not shake. She had ordered it. You did not come to my uncle to make a match. You came to my uncle to collect. I am the last installment. The smile held, but something behind the pale eyes had gone to stone. You are a romantic, Miss Lambourne. A business is a business. Your father borrowed, your father failed, the law took its course. I have offered you, since, a respectable name and a roof, which is a great deal more than the law required of me. You have offered me a cage, she said, and dressed it as charity, and waited 18 years to shut the door, and the only reason you are sweating into that very good coat is that I have said it out loud, in front of the one duchess in England whose word can outweigh your paper. The cold clarity was full upon her now, the calm of the worst moments, and she found she was not afraid. She was something far quieter and far more dangerous. You made one mistake this morning. You told me you had my mother's story all along. You meant it to frighten me. Instead, you told me you have been the spider in my house since I was a child. And a spider who boasts of his web has forgotten that other people can see it now too. A muscle moved at the corner of his jaw. There is still the bond, your uncle's roof, the lease. A word in the right ear at the post, and a great many words I have not yet spent. Spend them. Verity heard herself say it, and felt the floor of her whole life shift. She set the broken paper down on the green leather, smoothed it flat with her palm, and turned to face the Dowager and Julian both. And she said the thing she had spent 18 years arranging never to say. There were 11 men in bad coats at the door of my mother's house. I counted them through the banister rail. My mother came down in her good grey gown and told them there had been a mistake, and there had been no mistake, and they carried out the long case clock and her writing desk and the harp my grandmother brought from Bath. And my mother stood in the empty hall after, and did not weep where I could see her, because she was teaching me, though neither of us knew it, how a woman stands when the worst thing is happening, and there is nothing left to do but stand. Her voice did not break. It rang. That is the story, Mr. Crail. That is the whole of it. You may print it tomorrow. You cannot sell a thing its owner has just given away, and you cannot ruin a woman with a truth she has decided to tell herself out loud. You have nothing of mine left. You spent your last coin telling me you had it. The library was utterly silent. A wasp bumped the warm glass behind the curtain, droning, and the lamp oil and the old leather and the dust hung thick in the heat. And Silas Crail stood with his hat crushing slowly in his two hands, and understood. She watched him understand it. That the corner he had driven her into had only one door, and that she had walked out of it, past him. It was the Dowager who moved. She rose from the good chair without using the cane, which she had never once leaned upon, and she crossed the worn carpet to the reading table, and she looked down at the broken bond a long moment with her book-closed face. Then she picked it up. She held it to the bar of light, read the clerk's hand to the foot, and Verity saw the old eyes pause on the signature, and something pass over the proud face. Not the flinch she had filed away at the sight of the coat, but its near cousin, a kind of weary recognition. Mr. Crail, the Dowager said, and her voice had gone soft, which Verity had learned to fear in her as in him. Do you know what I dislike above all things? A man who supposes that because a woman is poor she is therefore for sale, and that because she is clever, she will know the price and take it. My granddaughter-in-law, for so this girl will be, if she chooses it, and on her own terms and no one else's, has more nerve in her ink-stained thumb than you have in your whole counting house. She folded the bond once, with great precision, corner to corner. This paper is mine, now. I shall send my own man of business to Cheapside within the hour, and he will examine every farthing of these sums advanced these 15 years and upward, at the rate at which they were advanced, against what the law allows a man to charge. And I think, Mr. Crail, that when he has finished his sums, it is you who will owe the estate at Lambourne, and not the reverse. You came into my house to collect a debt. You will leave it owing one. Good morning. Your Grace. There is a footman of mine in your pay, she went on, as though he had not spoken, and I shall find him by supper, and he will carry your name out of every house in this square by Friday. He will not be received. He will not be answered. You will be, Mr. Crail, exactly what you have spent 15 years making of other people, invisible. And I assure you, from the far end of a long life, that it is a colder country than you imagine. The door is behind you. Julian, see that it stays shut after him. Silas Crail looked once at Verity, and there was no soon in the pale eyes, and no creditor's patience, and at last, not even the stone, only the blank of a man who has staked on a card that was never in the pack. And he bowed, the exact correct depth, because cruelty in him was a kind of manners to the end, and he went out, and his patient feet went down the marble stair for the last time, and the great street door opened on the cry of the watercress man and the rattle of the square, and shut again, and he was gone into the white July glare, like a debt paid. For a moment the three of them stood in the dusty quiet, and only breathed. Then the dowager set the folded bond down on the table again, and put her hand flat upon it, and Verity saw, with a small shock, that the hand was not quite steady either, that the proud creature had spent something in the last 5 minutes that did not come cheaply even to her. Now, the old woman said, and her voice had changed once more, the softness gone, and under it something Verity had not heard from her. Plainness, the unguarded coin. I told you this morning there were 2 roads, the ruin that frees you and the rescue that binds you. I told you the second was a cage, and I told you I would name it because no one named mine. I find I must amend what I said. She drew a breath. I chose the cheap road first, child. When I read the post at 7 this morning, I chose, before I had finished my chocolate, to cut you to the bone and let the town pity my grandson. I am 76, and I have made 100 such choices and called them prudence. And I made this one in the time it takes to fold a newspaper. And I was wrong. And I am. The word plainly cost her. She paid it. Ashamed. There, you have heard a Marley say it. Note the hour. It will not recur. She crossed to the desk, took up a clean sheet and the pen, dipped it, and wrote standing, in a strong, old, upright hand, 3 lines and her name beneath them. She sanded it, and she did not give it to her grandson. She carried it to Verity and put it directly into her hand, folded once, the ink not yet dry, so that it smudged faintly under Verity's thumb. Verity unfolded it. The hand was the dowager's own. To Miss Verity Lambourne, the sum of £4,000, settled upon herself absolutely, and upon no condition whatsoever, that she may never again stand in any man's hall and be told what she is worth. Read it aloud, the dowager said. I find I should like to hear it stand in the air. Upon herself absolutely, Verity read, and her voice did, at last, waver 1 degree. And upon no condition whatsoever. £4,000 is what frees you, the dowager said. Not me, not my grandson, you. Now you may marry him, or refuse him, or walk to the river and keep walking. And whichever you do, you will do it as a woman, with a chair to sit in that no one can carry out of the hall. That is the only apology worth making to a girl who counts the doors. I have spent my whole acquaintance with you making them. I have, this once, given you one that opens. She stepped back and took up her cane, purely for the dignity of it, and turned to the door. I shall be in the yellow room. You two have a great deal to say to one another, and I have never in my life enjoyed watching it. Half an hour. Then you will both come and tell me what I am to send to the post. And Julian, for once in your life, you will let her decide it. The door closed behind the grey silk. The wasp had found the gap in the curtain and gone out into the garden, and the honeysuckle came in on the heat. And Verity stood in the bar of light, with £4,000 smudging in her hand, and her whole life rearranged around her, like furniture carried back into an empty hall. Julian had not moved from the door. He was looking at her the way he had looked on the balcony, fully, undefended, the performance gone. And his hand had gone to the heavy ring and was turning it, slowly. And this time he did not stop himself, and did not hide it. "You see through everything," he said. "So I will not perform. I had a speech. I burned it with the others." He came across the worn carpet and stopped an arm's length from her, near enough that she could see the morning's beard he had still not had shaved away. "I've spent 2 years being a counterfeit in my brother's coat, and you told me this morning in this room that a frightened man in a borrowed coat is a different thing and a more forgivable one, and I have thought of nothing else through everything that has happened since. I do not want to wear his coat to walk toward you. I want to come as the man who hid on the balcony, the spare, the amusing one, the one who need never be anything in particular, because he is the one you let stand still." He drew a breath that shook. "I love you, Verity Lambourne. Not because you saved my throat in front of London, though you did. Because you are the only person alive who looked at me and described what was actually there, and did not flinch, and did not bow, and did not want me smaller. I have no tidy thing to offer you. I never had. But the £4,000 is yours now, and so you do not need me, which means that if you take me, it will be the first thing in either of our lives that was chosen and not collected. And I find I want that more than I have ever wanted to be steady or clever or safe in any corner." The library was very quiet. Somewhere in the great house a clock began, sweetly, to tell the half-hour. Verity looked at him, at the strained shoulders, at the ring stilled now under his thumb, at the laughing eyes that were not laughing. And she did the thing she had spent 18 years learning never to do. She let herself be seen, and let it be enough. "Take off the coat," she said. He blinked. Take it off. You will not propose to me in your brother's coat. Lawrence was a good man, and I am sorry past saying that the house lost him. But he was made to be obeyed, and you are made to be known, which is rarer and worth more. And I will not stand here and let you hand me a man who is in the vault and call it yourself." Her voice gentled all at once, the cold gone clean out of it. "Come to me as Julian. I have been collected my whole life, Your Grace. I should very much like to be chosen back." He laughed, the short, surprised exhalation she had drawn from him on the balcony, as though she had tapped him on the sternum in the dark, and he shrugged out of the strained coat, and let it fall over the back of the desk chair, and in his shirt sleeves, with the heat standing in the room and the dust turning gold between them, the Duke of Marley took both her ink-grey hands in his warm, sure ones, and put his forehead down to hers. "Choose me back, then," he said, low. "I do," said Verity. "On my terms. The 4,000 stays mine. I shall say what goes in the post, and it will be the truth, and it will be unfashionably long. And the next coat you order will be cut for your own shoulders, and you will stand straight in it, and I will be standing beside you when you do." She closed her fingers round his. "Those are my conditions." "I accept them," said Julian. "Every one." And he kissed her, once, gently, in the small, used library, with the honeysuckle coming through the curtain, and the broken bond on the green leather, and £4,000 folded warm in her hand. And it was nothing at all like a trap, and everything like a door swung wide on a cooler country. And Verity Lambourne, who had counted exits her whole life, stopped counting. The notice that ran in the Morning Post 3 days later was indeed unfashionably long, and was widely held to be the most peculiar betrothal announcement of the season, and was read aloud in 100 drawing rooms with a great deal of disapproving delight, because it named the Lambourne ruin plainly, and named the gentleman of Cheapside plainly, and thanked the Dowager Duchess of Marley for her generosity, in the same breath that it declined to pretend the match was anything but a thing two frightened people had chosen with their eyes open. The town decided, on balance, to be charmed. The town is always charmed in the end, by anyone reckless enough to tell it the truth. It was a summer evening in September, when Verity stood again on the balcony at Marley House, and the heat had broken at last into something kinder, and the limes in the square had begun to turn at their edges, and the lanterns swung gold among the going yellow leaves. The stone of the balustrade was warm under her bare hands. She had taken off her gloves. Below, the fountain ticked over its own lip, and the honeysuckle had gone to seed, and smelt of the end of things, and the start of them, both at once. She was counting the lit windows of the house across the square. 1, 2, a dark one, 4, and she caught herself doing it, and laughed under her breath, because she did it now from habit and not from fear, and there is all the difference in the world. The long glass door opened behind her. The hinge had been oiled. It made no sound at all now, by her particular request, and Julian came out in a coat that fitted him, cut these 3 weeks past for his own broad shoulders, and he stood straight in it without being told, and on his smallest finger the heavy ring caught the lantern light. He did not turn it. "My grandmother," he said, coming to lean on the warm stone beside her, not too near, and then nearer, "wishes you to know that her man of business has finished his sums, and that Mr. Crail of Cheapside is to call upon her on Monday, hat in hand, to discuss what he owes the Lambourne estate, and that she intends to enjoy it more than is strictly Christian, and that you are invited to watch." "I shall bring my knitting," said Verity. "It will improve the occasion." "You don't knit." "I shall learn. Some things are worth doing badly." She turned her head and looked at him in the lantern light, the gift from birth face that she had read in a black glass on the worst and best night of her life. "Are you steady, Julian? You used not to be able to stand still out here." He considered it. He set his shoulder against the balustrade and looked out at the swinging lanterns that were his, and no longer envied the man he had borrowed them from, and his thumb stayed quiet on the ring. "I find," he said slowly, "that I no longer need to keep moving, because the thing I was running from has caught up with me, and it turned out to be a reasonable person on a balcony, and she is the gentlest fate I could possibly have imagined." He smiled, the small, true smile that cost more and was worth more. "1 second, you told me you wanted, that first night. 1 second of being unseen, and you'd be steady again." "I was wrong," Verity said. "It wasn't being unseen that steadied me." She put her bare hand over his on the warm stone. The fountain ticked. Somewhere below, a footman lit the second lantern from the corner, and its small gold flame bloomed in the blue dusk. It was being seen, and not made smaller. I only had the order of it backwards. I had it backwards my whole life. He turned his hand under hers, so their fingers laced, ink stains and signets together, and the honeysuckle breathed up warm from the dark garden, and across the square, a window she had marked as dark came a light. 5. And Verity Lambourne, who had run onto a balcony to disappear, and instead been found, leaned her head on the shoulder of the man who had been waiting his whole life to be known, and watched the lamps come on, one by one, over a city that had, at long last, stopped being a thing to count her way out of. "Without sugar," she said, when the tea came out on the little tray. And he laughed, because by now it was their oldest joke, and the tea was always without sugar. And the night took them whole. If this story warmed your evening, stay a while by the fire with us. Subscribe to Adrian's Fireside Stories for a new Regency romance every week. And tell me in the comments what you would have chosen on that balcony. The ruin that frees you, or the rescue that binds you. I do so love to hear how you'd have answered the Dowager. Until next time, sleep well and be gently seen.